After my father suddenly passed away from an unexpected illness, leaving behind a staggering $2 million debt, my mother and brother Tom took matters into their own hands. They decided how to handle my father's inheritance without consulting me, leaving me to bear the brunt of the debt. My frustration with them reached a boiling point, but the thought of their future struggles made me smirk inwardly. I'm Nancy, a 24-year-old single woman working as a nursery teacher at a daycare. I graduated from a junior college and have always lived at home with my father, mother, and my brother Tom, who is close to my age. Since childhood, Tom and I haven't gotten along. A graduate of a prestigious university, Tom looked down on me for my junior college education. His arrogance was matched by his frequent mockery of my modest personality and average looks. With your plain appearance and lack of impressive credentials, who would ever want to date you? He would sneer. In reality, I do have a boyfriend, but I keep this a secret to avoid provoking Tom's scorn. Though Tom's sarcasm used to sting, those days are long behind me. I now take great pride in my work as a nursery teacher, finding immense joy in interacting with children and watching them grow. Tom's words no longer faze me. My mother, who reveres Tom for his prestigious university degree, constantly boasts about him to relatives and neighbors. In stark contrast, I was often treated as an afterthought. It was clear that my mother favored Tom and showered him with preferential treatment. Unlike her, my father always had my back. Whenever my mother gave snacks exclusively to Tom, my father would secretly share the same treats with me. He would proudly express his admiration for my choice to become a nursery teacher, and I deeply cherished his supportive gestures and words. My father was the CEO of a small company where Tom also worked. Unfortunately, the company's financial situation had been deteriorating recently. Despite my father's relentless efforts to cut the deficit and his late nights at the office, Tom remained indifferent. I can't work for a company run by someone who looks so evenly poor, Tom said, resigning from the company to take a position elsewhere. Since her marriage, my mother had stopped working and fully dedicated herself to managing the household. With no experience in supporting my father's business, she didn't grasp the challenges he faced. Despite witnessing his daily struggles, she criticized him for the company's lack of success. The company is still struggling. If you don't resolve the deficit soon, I won't be able to buy that new bag from the magazine. Honestly, what are you doing every day? You're completely useless, my mother said. She had an insatiable appetite for spending, especially on luxury items, often making impulsive purchases. Her dismissive attitude toward my father, as if she couldn't see the value of his hard work, filled me with outrage. Though I'm no business expert, I've witnessed my father's tireless efforts from a young age and understand how challenging it is to manage a business. My mother, who has been with him for years, should recognize this as well. I couldn't fathom why she would blame him as though he were incompetent. One day, my frustration boiled over, and I confronted my mother, demanding she stop belittling my father. Her response was dismissive and condescending. Why should I be scolded by someone like you? People without an education should keep their opinions to themselves. Don't speak on things you don't understand, she retorted. Tom, seemingly influenced by my mother's attitude, joined in and criticized me harshly. It was clear that despite sharing the same blood, our values and personalities were worlds apart. Nancy, don't let their words affect you. Education doesn't define your worth. Take pride in your role as a nursery teacher. That's what truly matters, my father said. His words of encouragement warmed my heart and bolstered my resolve. Even though part of me wanted to stand up to Tom and felt overshadowed by him, my father's support made me feel fearless. As long as he was by my side, I knew I could face anything. An unexpected event shattered my world. Father, I was horrified to learn that my father had collapsed at work. The company staff who reached out to me said he was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Without hesitation, I dashed to the hospital, only to find that my mother and brother were nowhere to be seen. I'm too busy to leave. You'll have to handle Dad's care, my mother said. I was stunned by her response. How could she claim to be too busy when my father's life was at stake? As a jobless person, surely she had more flexibility than I did. What could possibly be more important than being there for my father? In disbelief, I took care of the hospital formalities and listened to the doctor's grim news. My father had acute heart failure and only had a few days left. I visited him as often as I could, hoping to see his smile once more. A few days after his collapse, as if sensing my presence, he briefly regained consciousness while I held his hand. Dad, I'm so relieved to see you. Do you recognize me? Can you hear my voice? I pleaded desperately, but he looked at me with a distant, vacant stare before quietly closing his eyes, never to open them again. Until my father passed away, neither my mother nor Tom made any effort to visit him. They only appeared just before the funeral, clearly reluctant to oversee the arrangements. During our conversation there, it became apparent that my father's company had gone bankrupt, leaving behind a $2 million debt. Inheritances come with debts, my mother said, her tone dripping with disdain. As the funeral proceeded, both she and Tom began to blame my father for the situation. He was unreliable in life, and now he's left us with this burden. What a curse, they complained. What are we supposed to do about all this debt? My mother wondered aloud. I have a suggestion, Tom said with a smirk, turning his gaze toward me. Since Dad had such a soft spot for you, why don't you inherit everything? You can also take on the debt. It's only fair to repay the love you received from him. My mother added, her voice carrying a sense of cold expectation. Unbelievably, my mother and Tom were trying to offload both my father's inheritance and his debts onto me. Despite my father's passing, they were more concerned with their own interests than with mourning his loss. They had always belittled and ridiculed both my father and me, seeing us merely as tools for their gain. However, I had a plan in reserve, something my father had asked me to use if anything happened to him. It was time to put it into action. I decided to keep my true intentions hidden and reluctantly agreed to their demands, all while secretly preparing to execute my plan. Understood. I will take on the entire estate, including the debt. My easy acquiescence surprised both my mother and Tom, considering I was assuming a $2 million debt. They probably anticipated more resistance from me, but their satisfaction in offloading the burden onto me seemed to eclipse any surprise. They looked at me with a mix of triumph and condescension. So, you're actually going to pay off all the debt. We appreciate that. It's lucky for us, even if I don't quite understand your thinking. You really are quite naive, though. I suppose that's to be expected given your limited education, Tom said. My mother and Tom ultimately relinquished their claims to my father's estate. With no other relatives to contest the inheritance, I was the sole beneficiary. After my father's death, I moved out of the home I no longer wished to live in and began a new chapter on my own. It was then that I discreetly set my plan into motion. Several months after my father's passing, one day, what on earth is this? Tom, who I hadn't seen in a while, appeared visibly enraged, his face reddening as if he was on the verge of lashing out. His fury was likely triggered by seeing me emerge from a mansion that could only be described as extravagant. Why is Nancy, who supposedly inherited $2 million in debt and has such a low social status, living in a house like this? It was clear that this was the question Tom and my mother would be asking. Seeing your astonished faces is quite the reunion after so long. I'm glad to see you're doing well, I responded. Who do you think you are? Making jokes with no education. I want to know what's going on, Tom snapped. This is where I live. Is it really so surprising to see me coming out of my own home? Tom, growing increasingly agitated, advanced toward me. However, as a nursery teacher accustomed to lifting children daily, I had developed more strength than the average woman. Tom, who led a sedentary lifestyle and avoided exercise, was comparatively weak. I swiftly overpowered him and had him on the ground in no time. He looked utterly bewildered. As Tom lay on the ground and my mother rushed to his side, I smiled and began to explain. The reason I'm living here is because of the decision you both made to relinquish Dad's inheritance. Before he passed away, my father had been quietly building wealth through real estate to secure our future. Despite the company's debt, the market value of the properties increased significantly after I inherited the estate. I sold them at the right time, and even after accounting for inheritance taxes, the profit from the real estate exceeded $5 million. My father had anticipated this rise in value, which is why I took on the inheritance, despite the debt. Instead of using the proceeds to pay off the $2 million debt immediately, I first ensured that the employees of my father's company were fairly compensated. Additionally, I received a life insurance payout of $3 million. The amount was truly staggering. Wait a minute. Life insurance is usually paid out to the spouse, right? My mother interjected. It appears Dad changed the beneficiary to me, I explained. He had informed me of this while he was still alive. My father was deeply troubled by your harsh words and excessive spending. To ensure that his life insurance money was used wisely, he trusted me to manage it and change the beneficiary. I have a dream that I've kept to myself, one to support and nurture children facing economic hardships. With the funds from my father's estate and the life insurance payout, I built a large house that could easily be called a mansion. While continuing my work as a nursery teacher, I am also applying the real estate investment skills I learned from my father to steadily grow my assets. After explaining everything, my mother and Tom were enraged, their voices rising in anger. This is absurd. Why didn't you tell us something so crucial? If we had known about the real estate, we never would have let you inherit it. I responded firmly, Dad anticipated that you would react exactly like this if he knew. That's why he kept it a secret, to prevent you from claiming everything. I didn't expect you to respond just as he predicted, but it seems he was right. What are you talking about? Regardless, we deserve our share of the inheritance. We have a right to it. I was taken aback by my mother's audacious demand for a portion of the assets. It was clear that when it came to money, people reveal their true nature. My mother and Tom were showing their cowardice and arrogance, just as I had always known them to be. You both forfeited that right when you renounced the inheritance. It's not possible to reclaim it now. I cannot hand over the hard-earned assets my father accumulated to people who are consumed by their own greed. The ignorant, uneducated one just won't stop whining. Quit your nagging and hand it over now, Tom shouted. Despite their continued baseless complaints, I had no choice but to call security to have them removed. They left quietly after being escorted out. In the following days, security footage showed them loitering near my house, trying to find a way to claim my father's inheritance. Their persistence was unsettling. Using the footage, I reported them to the police as suspicious individuals. After that, I no longer saw my mother or Tom around my home. After some time had passed, I learned about my mother and Tom's situation from a family friend who had been close to us for years. Tom had found a new job, but his self-centered attitude quickly earned him a poor reputation. Within less than a year, he had alienated his boss and was relegated to menial desk work, a far cry from the special treatment he had enjoyed as the president's son at my father's company. Eventually, the harsh work environment took its toll, and he left the job. His tarnished reputation made it challenging for him to find new employment within the industry. Why aren't you working? Stop lazing around, my mother would admonish. It's not like I'm just sitting around doing nothing, Tom would retort. What kind of effort are you putting in, you useless, unemployed person? My mother would criticize. After witnessing Tom's failure, her attitude toward him changed drastically. Once doting on him, she now blamed him for his incompetence and joblessness, growing increasingly cold and distant. The shift in my mother's behavior placed immense psychological pressure on Tom, eventually leading him to become a recluse. Having relied on my father's income for years and never having developed the skills or inclination to work, my mother now faces financial struggles alongside Tom. Both are struggling to make ends meet. As for me, I am happily married to the man I have been dating, and we now live in the large house I own. My husband shares my passion for helping children in economic need. Together, we are working towards this dream by setting up the necessary facilities and obtaining the required qualifications. I hold deep gratitude for my irreplaceable father, and with my husband by my side, I am living a fulfilling and purposeful life. Hi, I'm Jennifer Chen. Growing up, my parents instilled in me the belief that true wealth comes from humility and smart work. While other kids dreamed of being doctors or lawyers, I was captivated by the stock market. By 12, I was devouring investment books and obsessively tracking market trends, much to my parents' bewilderment. Sweetie, maybe you should spend more time with your friends, my mom would suggest, eyeing me over stacks of financial reports. This is fun for me, Mom, I'd reply without looking up. Did you know Warren Buffett bought his first stock at 11? She'd chuckle, shaking her head. Just promise me you won't forget to live while you're planning your empire. That promise grew harder to keep as my hobby turned into a passion and eventually expertise. By 16, I was managing a modest portfolio with my savings and allowance. Winning a full scholarship to study finance at Harvard felt like destiny. At Harvard, I met Michael. He was studying business administration, charming, ambitious, and aiming to climb the corporate ladder. We met during finals week, both reaching for the same economics textbook. Ladies first, he said with a warm smile. I laughed. Thanks, I'm Jennifer. Michael, maybe we could study together. What began as a shared study session blossomed into daily coffee dates, then a relationship. Unlike others I'd met, Michael admired my ambition. "You're going to dominate the business world," he'd say, watching me dissect market trends. "Any company would be lucky to have you." What he didn't know was that I wasn't planning to work for anyone else. My scholarship covered everything, so I funneled my earnings into investments. By graduation, my portfolio had grown exponentially. But I kept it quiet. I wanted success on my terms, not as the girl with the trust fund. Michael landed a prestigious job at Sterling Industries, a major tech firm in Boston, while I chose to work independently. When I declined several high-profile offers, Michael was skeptical. "Are you sure?" he asked. "These are dream opportunities." "I have my own plans," I replied with a smile. "Trust me." A year later, we got married in a modest ceremony. Michael's mother, Patricia, was less than thrilled with my career choice. "Investment consulting?" she'd sneer. "Is that even a real job?" I smiled, recalling my parents' advice about staying humble. By then, my portfolio was worth over $50 million, strategically diversified and quietly making me one of Sterling's largest individual shareholders. Though no one, not even Michael, knew. Michael thrived at Sterling, rising through the ranks to work under James Wilson, the arrogant VP of operations. Wilson was infamous for his outdated views, especially about women. "The problem with modern marriages," he'd say at company events, "is women forgetting their place." Michael would laugh awkwardly, avoiding confrontation. It irritated me, but I let it slide until the annual executive party. Sterling was unveiling restructuring plans, and as a key shareholder, I had a vested interest in attending. "Are you sure you want to come?" Michael asked. "These events can be dull for non-employees." "I think it's time I took a closer look at your work," I replied, carefully applying my makeup. I chose a classic black dress, pearl earrings, and my grandmother's vintage watch, a talisman in every major decision I'd made. The hotel ballroom buzzed with chatter as we arrived. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and the scent of champagne lingered in the air. Michael led me to James Wilson, who was holding court near the bar. "Jennifer." "Michael," James called, raising his glass. We were just discussing Sterling's exciting new direction. "Cutting R&D for short-term profits?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Doesn't innovation drive sustainable growth?" James's smile faltered. "Ah, the little wife has opinions on business, does she?" Laughter rippled through the group. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "She likes to read the financial news," he said quickly. "Honey, maybe we should grab some drinks." But James wasn't done. "Sterling's biggest problem," he announced loudly, "is too many voices from people who don't understand real business, like housewives who think reading the Wall Street Journal makes them experts." The crowd chuckled, but I noticed the CEO, Thomas Richards, watching with interest. My husband, once so proud of my intelligence, stared at his shoes. Before I could speak, a familiar voice interrupted. "Actually, James, you might want to rethink that." Sarah Martinez, my private banker and confidant, stepped forward, her smile sharp. "Should I explain, Jennifer, or would you like to?" James's smug expression faltered. "What's going on here?" I straightened, feeling my grandmother's watch against my wrist. The time had come. "Since you're so concerned about shareholder value, James," I said, my voice calm, "perhaps we should discuss the report I'm presenting at Monday's board meeting. The one outlining why your restructuring plan will fail." James turned crimson. "Board meeting? What are you talking about?" CEO Richards stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Jennifer Chen, JC Holdings." I knew the name sounded familiar. I smiled. Surprise. Strategic anonymity can be a powerful tool. "What's going on?" Michael whispered, his face pale and voice trembling. Sarah stepped forward, her tone cutting through the silence. "Your wife," she announced to the room, "owns 51% of Sterling Industries shares. And no, she doesn't spend her days shopping." The silence hung for a moment before chaos erupted. James Wilson's face turned a vivid red, cycling through shades I didn't know were possible. Michael looked as though he might faint. "This is absurd," James sputtered. "There must be some mistake." Sarah, ever composed, tapped on her tablet. "I can show you the documentation if you'd like." I have all the records right here. CEO Richards stepped forward, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That won't be necessary, Sarah. I've suspected as much for some time. The board has been impressed with Mrs. Chen's insights and recommendations for years. James turned to him, stunned. You knew. Of course, Richards replied smoothly. Why do you think your restructuring plan hasn't been approved? Mrs. Chen raised significant objections. Michael finally found his voice, though it wavered. Jennifer. How? When? I met his wide-eyed gaze. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, I suggested, glancing at the growing crowd of onlookers. My office is just upstairs, Richards offered. Shall we? The elevator ride was oppressively silent. Michael alternated between glancing at me and staring at the floor, while James seethed. Sarah, steady as ever, stood by my side, a quiet but unwavering presence. Richard's office was expansive, with panoramic views of the Boston skyline. As we took our seats, James immediately claimed the chair nearest Richard's desk, as if proximity could restore his authority. Well, Richards began, leaning back in his chair, this has been an eventful evening. Eventful? James exploded. This is outrageous. She can't possibly. She can and does. Sarah interrupted, laying documents on the desk. Jennifer Chen, through carefully managed investment vehicles, controls 51% of Sterling Industries. She's been building her position over the past 5 years. Michael's expression morphed from confusion to hurt. 5 years? But we've been married for 3. I started investing in Sterling before we met. I explained evenly. The company had potential but needed modernization. I saw an opportunity. Modernization? James sneered. Yes, James, I replied calmly. Modernization. Like fostering innovation instead of getting R&D. Like respecting your employees instead of perpetuating a toxic workplace. Richards leaned forward. Mrs. Chen's recommendations have been instrumental in shaping our strategy. Her analysis has consistently outperformed expectations. Michael's voice was barely audible. Why didn't you tell me? I held his gaze. Would it have made a difference? Would you have defended me against James's comments if you'd known I was Sterling's majority shareholder? He flinched, the answer clear without being spoken. This is preposterous, James barked, rising from his chair. I've dedicated 15 years to Sterling. You can't just turn it into a toxic environment where innovation and talent are stifled. I interrupted. James, your restructuring plan would destroy this company. The board won't be supporting it, Richards cut in. In fact, we need to discuss your future with Sterling. My future? James looked stricken. Yes, I said, standing to meet his glare. Your leadership is outdated, your strategies are short-sighted, and your conduct unacceptable. Sterling deserves better. You can't fire me, James shouted. You're just a majority shareholder, Sarah interjected coolly. And yes, she can. Michael remained frozen, his expression unreadable. You told me you were consulting, he murmured. You said it was small scale. I never lied, I said softly. I just didn't tell you everything. Would you have respected my decisions if I had? James erupted again, pointing at Michael. She's tearing us apart. Women like her. That's enough, Richard snapped, his tone sharp. James, you'll receive the details of your separation package tomorrow. Please leave. James stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Sarah excused herself, leaving me alone with Michael and Richards. Mrs. Chen, Richards began, will you be taking a more active role in the company? Yes, I replied firmly, starting with a comprehensive review of our culture and leadership. Michael finally spoke, his voice cracking. And what about us? I turned to him, my voice steady. That depends. Are you ready to see me as an equal, or am I still just the little wife you asked to stay quiet at company events? I need time, he stammered, standing abruptly. This is all too much. He left, and I watched his retreating figure. Richards cleared his throat. Family and business rarely mix well. True, I said, exhaling deeply, but principles shouldn't be compromised. The days that followed were a whirlwind. James's firing made headlines, Sterling Industries, a shakeup at the top. The stock price dipped briefly before recovering as my vision for the company became public. Michael stayed with his parents, processing everything. His mother left a string of hostile voicemails, which I deleted without hesitation. My focus remained on transforming Sterling, revitalizing R&D, implementing work-life balance policies, and fostering innovation. A week later, Michael returned. He looked worn, his usual polish replaced by exhaustion. "Can we talk?" he asked hesitantly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, then immediately stood again, pacing nervously. "I've been thinking about everything," he began. "About us, about work." "And?" I prompted. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice low. "I let James and others disrespect you. I should have stood up for you. I was so focused on my career that I forgot what really matters." I watched him for a moment before replying. "Change doesn't come through words, Michael. It comes through actions. Are you ready to show me that you see me as your equal?" He nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "Yes, I am." I waited silently, giving him space to continue. "But you weren't completely honest either," Michael added after a moment. "You kept such a huge part of your life hidden from me. How are we supposed to have a real marriage with secrets like that?" "You're right," I admitted, keeping my voice calm. "I should have trusted you with the truth. But Michael, ask yourself, why didn't I feel I could?" He sank into the chair, his hands running through his hair. "Because I showed you I couldn't be trusted. Every time I laughed at James's jokes, every time I told you to stay quiet, I proved I cared more about office politics than supporting my wife." The next few weeks tested everything: my marriage, my resolve, and my ability to steer Sterling Industries through massive change. James Wilson hadn't gone quietly. He hired a lawyer and threatened to sue for wrongful termination, and his allies within the company whispered behind my back. "She's tearing down our traditions," they muttered in the break room. "This is what happens when you let emotions run a business," others sneered. But facts don't lie. Within a month, employee satisfaction soared by 40%, and R&D, finally free from James's stifling grip, filed 12 patent applications. The stock price climbed steadily, proving that my changes were more than just radical. They were necessary. At home, Michael hovered in a strange limbo, sleeping in the guest room and walking on eggshells around me. His mother, Patricia, however, had no such hesitation. She stormed into our house one afternoon, her designer heels clicking like gunfire. "We need to talk," she announced, barely pausing before stepping into the living room. "By all means," I said dryly, closing the door behind her. "This power trip of yours has gone far enough," she declared, folding her arms. "You've made your point. Now step back and let the men handle business." I raised an eyebrow. "The men?" "You've humiliated Michael enough already," she snapped. "His colleagues don't know how to treat him anymore. Do you have any idea what this is doing to his career?" "Humiliating?" I repeated. "Like being laughed at during business functions? Like being dismissed as just a housewife?" "That's different." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "That's just how business works. Men need to." "Need to what, Patricia?" "Undermine women to prop up their egos. Pretend competence doesn't exist if it comes from the wrong gender." "You tricked him," she burst out. "My son married you thinking you were a normal wife, and no. Now what?" Michael's voice cut through the tension, startling us both. "Michael." Patricia turned to him, her expression softening with relief. "Thank goodness you're here. We need to talk sense into her before she destroys everything." But Michael wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on me, filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks: understanding. "Mom," he said evenly, "you need to leave." "What?" "But." "Now," he said firmly. After she left, silence settled between us. Michael sank onto the couch, exhaustion etched into his face. "I heard everything," he said quietly, "and I finally realized I've been just like her, treating you like you needed to be managed, not supported. And I'm sorry." I sat down beside him, keeping a cautious distance. "I didn't want to outshine you, Michael. I just wanted your respect as your wife, as a partner, as a person." "You have it," he said softly. "I know I don't deserve your trust right now, but I want to earn it. Not because of your money or your power, but because I love you. And I want to be the partner you deserve." My phone buzzed, breaking the moment. It was Sarah. "Jennifer," she said when I answered, "James has withdrawn his lawsuit. Word about Sterling's latest quarterly projections has spread, and they're impressive." Send me the details, I said with a smile. And Sarah? Thank you. For everything. When I hung up, Michael asked, "Good news." James is backing down. I confirmed. It seems success really is the best revenge. Michael nodded thoughtfully. What happens now? With Sterling and with us? Sterling will keep evolving, I replied. We're rolling out a new parental leave policy and launching a mentorship program for women in tech next month. And us? He asked, his voice hesitant. I took a deep breath. That depends. Are you ready for a marriage of equals? Really ready? I'd like to try, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Starting with moving out of the guest room, if you're okay with that. It's killing my back. I laughed, surprising myself. We'll need couples counseling, and you'll have to stand up to your mother. Done, he said, grinning. Though maybe we should have dinner with her next week. I'd love to see her face when you explain your women's leadership initiative. For the first time in weeks, I felt real hope for our future.